Good afternoon, business ethics students. My name is Joey Howder, and I'm here today to introduce to you Chapter 10, The Moral Choices Facing Employees. I'd like to welcome all of you into the friendly confines of my sister's bedroom. You can see the nice decor behind me. But I'm going to begin Chapter 10 with a story. The chapter begins talking about a senior engineer named George who works for a company named Northeast Utilities. This company operates a number of nuclear power plants in the New England area, and it talks about how George spoke up about something, and apparently HR didn't like it, so they brought him in and told him he was being reassigned. They basically sat him down and said that you need to start thinking about the company, being a team player, because he had apparently broken a moral code within the company and spoke up about some problems. One of his co-workers actually had discovered that there was a huge safety problem at their main plant, so George decided to speak up on his behalf. So what was going on at this company, at their main plant, in order to save money, they were violating federal guidelines by cutting corners with their fuel procedures, and one of their engineers happened to find this out. And of course, when he told his supervisors, both them and the higher-ups, obviously they knew this was going on, but they denied any issues. Then even tried to bring in outside experts to prove it. And obviously those experts found the problem. So after those experts came in, the supervisors, the high-ups, the executives were like, yeah, we'll fix the problem. We'll make sure we're handling this safely. And then 2 years go by, nothing happens. So this engineer decides to go directly to the NRC, which is the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. And it was there he found out that the NRC had known about this unsafe procedure going on for years, so it seems like there was a little collusion going on between this company and the NRC, but the NRC had been hiding this as well. So after this, engineer George sort of blew the whistle on how they had been practicing unsafe procedures with their fueling process. He was constantly harassed at work and looked down by many coworkers. People were angry with him, and he wasn't the only one dealing with this. He had dozens of other co-workers that were either fired or demoted for raising concern about these safety issues. And after he went forward, the NRC still didn't want to do anything, so he got a lawyer and kept pushing for this. Well, they really pushed him to the side. The NRC did end up going in there and finding problems. So that plant got shut down, and a few others were put on a high scrutiny list. So in the end, both these engineers got what they wanted, I guess, in getting this information out and having the unsafe procedures stop, but it ended up hurting their careers. Yes, they kept their jobs at this company, but none of their coworkers or anyone would look at them the same professionally again. They got targets on their back, people are still mad with them, and it really hurt their careers. So this story brings up a few lessons from the chapter. Do you have moral obligation to your company, your self-interest, and also topic of whistleblowing. I'll now hand it off to my classmates as they're going to dive into these topics and more. Thank you.
After you have accepted your job, you are usually set to a standard amount of hours. You are also agreed to perform a certain task in which you will receive a paycheck for. You are also given a contract that has a list of rules and guidelines. For example, dress code. My name is Trent, and I will be talking about employees' obligation to the firm. First thing I will be talking about is loyalty to the company. Every company has obligations you must follow. The law of agency places you under a legal obligation to act loyally and in good faith and carry out and put lawful instructions. An example of this would be Ralph Lauren successfully sued an employee for letting a friend buy clothes with their employee discount. The employee argued that he was a low-level worker, so he had no loyalty to the business whatsoever. The court still sued him. It is unethical, but morality requires neither blind loyalty nor total submission to an organization. Some people say that employees have no obligation Some people say that employees have no obligation of loyalty to the company. This is This is because it's not an object of loyalty, but because a business functions to make money, and self-interest is all that ties employees to their business. Loyalty is something that demands self-sacrifice with no reward. For example, people are loyal to friends, family, and even a country. And an employee is simply there to get paid, but this is not always the case. Company loyalty is often found in the workplace as well. It is those employees that are willing to go the extra mile and work extra time or help somebody that they might not necessarily get paid for. Loyalty is a two-way street, and a company needs to earn their employees' loyalty. So my opinion on this is that employees should be loyal to the company that they work for. They are committing themselves to the business that they work for when they decide to work there, so they should be giving their all to the company to make it a better place to work for everybody else. So the next thing I'll be talking about is conflicts of interest. If the employee wants to dress one way, but the job demands you to dress a different way, this is a conflict of interest. A couple other examples of conflicts of interest could be an employee wanting to get paid a higher amount than they are, or somebody wanting to come into work at 10 o'clock, but they have to be there at 8. So the definition of conflict of interest is it arises when employees at any level have special or private interests that are sustainable enough to interfere with their job duties. Conflict of interest could come into play when an employee invests in the supplier of the business they work for. Another example is a employer of Apple investing in stock of Samsung. This could look very bad for Apple's company, as Samsung is a great competitor with Apple, and if their employees are investing in Samsung, it does not look good. This could also be an Apple customer carrying a Samsung phone. It gives the image that the Apple employee does not want to carry their own product. So I think the conflict of interest could be a big problem, such as the example that I just gave with Apple. They have so many employees within their business that it's hard to regulate in which every employee invests in and which phone they might carry. Now I'm going to discuss a couple of cases that went along with obligations to the firm. The first one is case 10.1, changing jobs and loyalties. So I'm going to start off with a summary of the case. So Catherine has been offered a job that she has always wanted. She was telling her husband about the job, all excited, but he had some concerning questions. He reminded her that she is in the middle of working on a project that will take 3 months to finish up, and it carries a lot of financial value with the company. The new job wanted her to make a decision right away and start very soon. He stated that she would be letting down the company and the people that she's working on that project with if she decided to leave, since they would have to find a replacement for her and train them on the spot how to do the job that she is already doing. So my opinion on this is that I think she has no moral obligation to stay with the company she is currently working for. She has always wanted to work for this other company, even though it competes right with the company she works at now. The company that she works at now, I think, will find somebody else to replace her and take over the current project that she is working on. It might set them back, but they will eventually move on from the problem. Next case I will be talking about is case 10.2, conflicting perspectives on conflicts of interest. So this one's a little confusing, so I'll start with a summary. So Richard was the head of a board of directors of Citibank. Citibank was a large bank but was in financial trouble. One of the customers was Providence. Providence is a large equity firm that has significant holdings in MGM and a couple other major large companies. He became a senior advisor to Providence, in which he will get paid for. So, he will be a chair for a company that is lending money to that he works for. Since he had financial stake in Providence, it looks like a conflict of interests. Citibank said that they don't see a problem of conflict of interest because he says that he does not make any financial decisions per Providence. So personally, I'm going to have to agree with Citibank. I don't really see a problem with it as long as he is not making financial decisions for Providence. Thank you for listening.
Hi everyone, my name is Cooper Katzel. I'm going to be talking about abuse of official position. This can be a multitude of things, from misusing expense accounts to billing the company for unnecessary travel. Executives can also misuse the funds by using it for private purposes. For example, Bernard J. Ebbers, who used over $400 million for personal uses. Also blackmailing for one's own personal gain, which is we see every day in the news. But today I'm mainly going to talk about is insider trading. Insider trading is the most common ways officials abuse power. Insider trading is buying and selling of stocks based on non-public information that is likely to affect the price. And so a great example of this is Dr. Sam Waxel and ImClone Systems. So ImClone Systems found out that the FDA was not going to approve their drug for cancer. This meant a huge hit on their stock price. Because of this, Dr. Sam Waxel sold all of his stock before the FDA could come out with this information, meaning that he could still sell it at the price that it was before it declined. He also told Martha Stewart this, who had $45,000 worth of stock invested in that company, to sell everything before the decline hits. And so this is a problem because anyone who was a huge investor like Martha Stewart can get out early and not take a huge loss, versus other people like me who is a college student who might invest in this company and think that's going to be a huge success, loses the money they put in. But insider trading doesn't just have to be the person who sells the stock. For example, Genentech's president and chief executive officer were charged with insider trading by telling their brother that they think their new stock is going to go really well based on something in the company. So this is a problem because they can buy more stock and make more money without other people being able to have the chance to buy the stock as well, because there's only so many stock shares people can buy. So insider trading actually, even if it is the stock going up, can get you in trouble as well, not just if the stock's going to plummet and save you money. It can go both ways. Another example of a stock going up but becoming insider trading is Texas Gulf sulfur stock scandal. This became a scandal because Texas Gulf did not want to declare that they found a rich ore deposit, but instead they said that they likely found not much and that it's not going to be a huge hit, when in reality they found a massive amount of ore. So this is a problem because the people at Texas Gulf could buy the stock and make a ton of money from it instead of a bunch of other people making the money. And the other reason it was so bad is they tried to downplay what they had found, meaning that they weren't giving public information or the truth about what they found, and that this result let insiders pay into a special group that got to choose what they did with their stocks, meaning most of them bought more stock because they knew that they actually found a lot of ore, versus a lot who had originally bought the stock decided to sell it since they didn't think they actually found much ore. So that means all the people on the inside got the most money, hence insider trading. So all this raises an interesting question. How much can employees buy and sell their stocks based on the information that they really do know? Personally, to me, I think that if there's a major finding, then that becomes a problem, because a lot of the employees who are working it might find it and determine, oh my God, I should sell my stock in this company, it's going to go down, or I should start buying more stock. And it's hard to determine whether that's just them being smart or insider trading. So to me personally, I think this is a huge kind of ethical problem, because you're not really knowing how they found out. Now, if it's someone not within the company, like Martha Stewart, for example, who just had enough money in the company and friends with the CEO to get that knowledge, then I think that's a huge problem of insider trading, and then she should definitely be prosecuted. But for example, let's say Apple found something with exploding iPhones instead of Samsung, and an employee went to sell all of their stocks. That can also become a problem, because if it's not announced publicly, they're selling all their stock and making a ton of money off of it. So it's really hard for me to determine which ethical side to go to. And so actually my next slide is talking about, is insider trading okay? So the two sides of it from the book describe it as, some believe that insider trading is wrong since the marketplace can only work if it is perceived as being honest and offers equal investment opportunity. Versus the other side says that insider trading is good for the market since it accelerates the flow of positive and negative information to stockholders and investors. So for this, I had a pretty easy choice. I chose that it should not be okay, because if you're giving information quicker to stockholders and investors, it means the rich get richer pretty much. And so people who don't have that access to information are going to lose a ton of money each time, unless they can see the patterns. But that also comes into day trading. And day trading is buying and selling stocks every day. So unless you're doing that and watching for a huge dip in all the investors selling their stocks, you're going to miss out and you're going to lose money. So that's why I think being honest and equal is the best route for insider trading, for not insider trading, because it does give everyone an honest and equal investment opportunity. And for the people that somehow get away with insider trading, they're still making their money, just not the honest way. Another thing I see as a problem with insider trading is that companies can actually tell their own employees, okay, something's going to happen with the company, sell your stock. That may be beneficial to the employees itself, but the outside of the employees would also get hurt. The people who invested that aren't an employee. So even if some people see it ethically as telling your employees and trying to save them money because they're your employees, it's still insider trading. It can even get them in more trouble, or you. So next, I want to talk about some other abuses of the official position. And the first thing I'm going to talk about is Lexar and Toshiba. So this is actually an interesting case because I really didn't realize what had happened or that this ever happened, even though Lexar and Toshiba are pretty well-known companies. But what happened was Lexar ended up suing Toshiba because Toshiba ended up sharing its confidential flash memory technology to SanDisk, which we all know SanDisk is a major company for flash drives and SD cards and everything like that. So imagine losing that much money because Toshiba shared its secrets. So they ended up suing them for this, which is a pretty big deal because they're both huge companies, and I'm sure a lot of money was involved, and I'm sure Lexar actually lost a ton of money due to SanDisk becoming so popular. Is Procter & Gamble sued Duncan Hines. So Procter & Gamble and Duncan Hines are both chocolate chip cookie makers. And so Procter & Gamble claims that a sales representative for Duncan Hines, or an official, went to a sales presentation at one of their cookie plants. And so the Duncan Hines had one of their kids with them and told them to go get some of the cookie dough, because they were handing out cookie dough. And they actually used that to figure out the recipe and figure out what made Procter & Gamble's cookies so good. So they sued them for that, which is obviously, not a great thing because they're losing business now in case Duncan Hines makes the cookie even better. And so this actually goes off of trade secrets versus patent products. So a trade secret is any formula, pattern, or device or compilation of information in which a company uses to gain an advantage over another company because they don't know that secret. Versus a patent product only lasts for so many years, and once that patent is up, other companies can start to use it. So on the Procter & Gamble side of it, they probably had a trade secret on what they used in their formula to make the cookies that Duncan Hines obviously wanted, and since it wasn't a patent and it was a trade secret, they had to steal the information. And so the last thing I want to talk about is employees who join a competitor. Now this becomes a problem because if an employee joins a competing place, like Procter & Gamble, let's say again, they can try and get the new employee at Duncan Hines to talk about what Procter & Gamble used, or what secrets they were using, or what maybe different sales pitches if they're not in the cooking aspect of it, or their marketing ideas. So this can take away from Procter & Gamble's advantages that they had over Duncan Hines by higher ups employing this new employee for a higher salary, which is often the case, and trying to get him to turn on his old employer. Thank you.
Okay. Bribes and kickbacks. So to start it off, what is a bribe? A bribe is to persuade someone to act in one's favor, typically illegally, dishonestly, or by a gift of money or other form. So a kickback is very similar to a bribe, and it is a payment made to someone who has facilitated a transaction or employment, especially illicitly. And are they illegal? Many states and countries have made laws and they make taking bribes illegal by public officials. In Ohio, it's a felony actually, and the most recent example that I could come up with that is it's in Ohio, it's really close to Alliance, and I'm from Mahoney County, Youngstown, Ohio. It is in 2015, Trumbull-Mahoney County, the United States Department of Justice indicated that several World Cup executives involved in the World Cup fraud for pocketing more than $150 million in bribes. One hits a little more home for me than it probably does for most other people, because being from Mahoney County, you heard about it and then you see what it did. So being from Youngstown, I see the negative effect that the bribes that used to go on and most likely still to go on by the gangsters or the mobsters, because that's one of the things that Youngstown is most famous for, is the mob. And essentially essentially the movie Scarface, you see that and you're like, well, that never happens in real life. And then you'll go walk around the street and just hanging out with your friends and you'll hear about it. You hear about how it happened. And essentially they would pay public officials money not to bust them for, whether it was for drugs, sometimes even murder. Would pay the chief of police, would just pay police officers though that they wouldn't patrol a certain area, and that the mobsters and the gangsters and their families can do whatever they'd like, which it may have worked out for them for decades and may still be working out for them now. I don't know. It eventually will catch up to them, just like it did in 2015 for the World Cup officials, because that was going on for, they said, decades in the article I read. And the people that started it didn't get caught, but the people that were still doing it at the end, obviously, they're now going to spend, assuming the rest of their lives, in prison without a chance of parole, which, I mean, it's a felony, so it's warranted. Now, are they ethical? Are they unethical? So, yes, paying someone to do something illegal is extremely unethical, and that our law system is set up to be fair and just to everyone in this country, even though we all know it's not perfect. It's not anywhere close to perfect. It has its flaws, but in its core values, it's fair and just to everyone, because we all have the same laws to follow. We all have the same consequences for those laws. Although we do have juries and people come off free, innocent people can go to jail. Basically, it's just better. We all face the same consequences. We are supposed to. But we all know that doesn't always happen. If they were deemed ethical, our law and political and health system would be extremely corrupt and would not work to serve the lower class. It wouldn't serve anyone that wasn't extreme upper class and could pay the government's salaries, essentially. I mean, I don't want to live in a country that it would be, hey, if you have millions of dollars, you can do whatever you want, but if you don't, well, there's nothing you can do about it now. You have to follow the rules, but they don't. Which, it happens now, but eventually it doesn't pay off in the end, such as they will end up in prison, or they will just, it doesn't pay off, they'll end up in prison, it's just not something that should be, it's not allowed and it shouldn't be done. I remember when I was probably around 15, 16, just hanging out with my friends on the south side of Youngstown, and you just see these like older Italian men, and you hear stories and you watch Scarface and you're like, oh, it's probably in the mob, and like it's a joke, and then like after you get older and you read about what happened in 2015, you realize that they're still there, and they're most likely still paying the city officials. And, well, if you have enough money to pay a city official, there's a good chance you have enough money to pay a government official. And after paying a government official, why not just keep going because if you have enough money, might as well pay them, and you know you're not going to get caught. But eventually you will get caught. And, I mean, it catches up for everything. So, in conclusion, it's extremely unethical. On the basis of the good of the few should not come before the good of the many. And essentially, if it was deemed ethical by our society would crumble and it wouldn't work, and the 1% of people that could afford to pay off whoever they want, then they would get away with it. So, in reality, it would never work, and I don't think it will ever become ethical ever in our lifetimes or in the history of the United States, just based off our Constitution of our rights. And the Constitution covers everyone. If it didn't cover everyone, then our justice system wouldn't work. Only lower class would end up going to jail. Upper class would never be in jail. And it would just wreck our society, wreck our country. And there'd be no point in working or doing much, because you would just get stepped on by the guy that has more money already. So why try to be one of them?
Business gifts and entertainment are commonly used to strengthen relationships between business team members and associates. There are times when gifts and entertainment are appropriate within a work setting. This could include catching lunch with your boss, or receiving tickets to a sporting event or a play, or just small gifts from your company in general. It can also consist of traveling perks. A lot of businesses must travel, so they might give their employee a meal ticket or something along those lines. Although these may seem harmless, gifts can become substantial and can lead to a display of unlawful payments. My name is Nolan Abiadisi, and I'm going to be speaking about gifts and entertainment and how they can impact an individual and a company. Some key issues are a recipient may seem obligated to repay the donor. Let's take lunch, for example. Lunch can just be viewed as a simple way of two coworkers or friends just having a meal. But another person could view this as borderline bribery. If the boss or the associate expect either of them to do something for one another, which would not be in the best interest of the company. This can lead to a conflict of interest concerns where one party is just doing this for personal gain and does not line up with organizational goals. To determine if a gift is right or wrong, there are 7 questions that a responsible person could ask themselves. The first question is, what is the value of the gift? Does the gift have a substantial value or no value at all? That could persuade decision making. As a rule of thumb, organizations like to keep gifts under $25 to be considered nominal, but that can be up for debate. A lot of organizations have different rules regarding gifts and entertainment. Keep in mind that any gift of any size can be influential and could also cause problems within the organization. The second question is, what is the purpose? Reflect on the reason why the gift is being given in the first place, or why you are receiving a gift. There are not many problems if small gifts are received occasionally from someone, but these gifts should not influence how you run your business and should be fair for everyone. The given example is a department store manager receiving flash drives as a gift from an electronic company. This raises questions since the flash drives are sold in the store, so the electronic company may be trying to gain free advertising from the department store manager. But if these gifts are given occasionally, that is okay. But a gift like a new iPhone or an expensive set of golf clubs may raise some questions since those are bigger gifts. The third question, what are the circumstances under which the gift was given or received? It makes sense if a gift is given around a holiday or a special event regarding the business, like opening day for a new business. It's also important to note if a gift was given in public or private. If it's just a gift, then why can't it be seen in public? If it's received in private or given in private, that can raise more questions. The fourth question, what is the position of the person receiving the gifts? Could the donor of the gift receive special treatment from the recipient? This could influence illegal action and could be questionable for in the eyes of a work environment. Whether the recipient, it's also important to note whether the recipient told the donor it would or would not affect his or her decision regarding the gift. The fifth question, what is the accepted business practice in the industry? So, does the gift make sense in the situation? An example of this would be tipping the server at a restaurant after you're finished eating. That's common knowledge. You should tip your server after you're finished with a meal at a restaurant. But a bad example would be tipping a produce manager at a supermarket so that he or she puts aside fresh vegetables or different food for you to pick up. That is not public knowledge and should not be done in a workplace. The sixth question is, what is the company's policy? Firms are usually upfront with their employees if they are allowed to accept gifts from associates. An example, Walmart doesn't permit employees to accept gifts from anyone. And another department store, Kmart, requires managers, vendors, and everyone who Kmart deals with to sign a no gifts policy, which is businesses are never wrong with this policy. They are upfront with their employees and let them know that if gifts are accepted or not acceptable. The final question is, what is the law? Obviously, if a transaction violates the law, it is clearly unacceptable. Government employees, federal, state, and local government employees are forbidden to receive gifts. Fidelity Investments, a mutual fund, they were fined for accepting gifts from brokers when brokers wanted to do business with them, which is against the law. On the other hand, entertainment, it can be distinguished as if you can eat or drink it on the spot, then it's entertainment. Entertainment is more of a social setting in which business is done. So taking associates from another firm within your company to eat is acceptable. I believe gift giving is a great way for companies to show a small amount of appreciation. Gifts should not be big, though. I like the under $25 rule that most companies do. Another rule could be if the recipient can't buy it with his or her own money, then it's probably not the right gift for them, and it's definitely too expensive and can raise a lot of questions. Gift giving should also be public knowledge. Nothing should be done behind closed doors, because that can lead to a lot of questions and cause concerns for a conflict of interest.
Hi everyone, this is Max Rigetti, and for my portion of Chapter 10, I will be covering conflicts of interests. So first off, by definition, a conflict of interest would be when an employee at any level has a special or private interest that is substantial enough to interfere with their job duties. One of the things that I think we should point out right at the beginning of this section is that colliding interests are not conflicts of interest. For two examples of colliding interests would be that you do not prefer the company's dress code that you have to adhere to, and you want to dress differently, so sometimes maybe you will, and you will push the limits of the dress code. And another example would be that you believe you should be paid more money than you are currently being paid, but the company does not agree with that and continues to pay you what they pay you. Those are examples of colliding interest. So, two examples of conflicts of interest would be giving business to a family member just because they're family. So let's just say you had a sibling that worked at an advertising agency, and at your company, you're the one who elects the advertising services. So you decide you're going to go with the advertising agency that your sibling owns and runs just because they're your sibling and not because they are the best choice. There are also financial conflicts of interest, which would be, for example, say there's a small startup advertising agency that is local to your company, and you've put a stake in, like a monetary stake into that company. So instead of deciding to go with an advertising agency that looks like it is the best fit for your company, you decide to take all of your advertising needs to this small startup company only because you have a financial stake, even though the qualities of this new company are not as high as the qualities of another. So conflicts of interest can occur at all levels of business, and they're not limited to just financial conflicts or family relation conflicts. In an employment setting, examples could include, but they're not limited to, recruitment of new employees, employee advancement. There could be marriages in the workplace that you have to consider, close personal relationships between employees and supervisors, and etc. Things like that. As you could imagine, conflicts of interest also are not just related to the business world. It is also an ethical issue that happens in schools, in the medical field, sports,
churches, government especially, and more. Basically, conflicts of interest in a nutshell can take place when humans are interacting and making decisions that affect the group and not just their individual self. So, conflicts of interest can also be said to happen even when it seems like there is none. For example, assume that you give your company's advertising work back to the firm that your brother owns, assuming your brother owned an advertising firm. But in this case, the firm that the work that your brother owns has a quality of work that would be considered equal to that of another firm that you could give your business to. A conflict of interest could still be said to be taking place and be said to exist. It is important to note that conflicts of interest are morally worrisome not only when an employee acts to the detriment of an organization, but also when an employee's private interests are significant enough that it could tempt the person to do so. So a question you might be asking is if a conflict of interest would be illegal to have. And the answer to that is no. Having a conflict of interest isn't illegal in itself because it happens all the time in small towns and communities, and they're destined to happen just because you're going to know people in business, or you're going to have personal relationships with people in business or in other organizations. Obviously, the potential is there in multiple organizations to have conflicts of interest constantly, but generally speaking, most organizations will have a policy in place to handle conflicts of interest. Most of the time, an organization will have a policy regarding conflicts of interest that includes a review process of actions, how to handle conflicts, and what the consequences would be in the case that your conflict of interest would actually be of detriment to the organization that you're taking part of. So, my opinion on a conflict of interest is that I believe there's a line where conflicts of interest could become too much, but I don't believe that that a conflict of interest is always going to be immoral. For example, we'll go back to the idea of a sibling like your brother owning an advertising firm, and you are the person who will be deciding what advertising firm gets the business of your company. On paper, you might know that your brother's advertising firm may not look as nice as another firm and might have cost a little more, or the technology they have might be a little bit lower than another firm, but at the same time you know that the personal touch and the customer service that your brother's firm has to offer is much higher than that of a competing firm. So I believe it's important to note in business transactions that there is a certain qualitative part of a product or a deal that needs to be taken into account, and that it's not entirely quantitative. At the same time, I don't believe that financial conflicts of interest are to be considered moral. I believe if you do have a financial interest in another company and you are giving your work to that company just based on the fact that it's financial interest and it would benefit you, I think that would be immoral. For example, say there's the startup advertising firm that you just invested money in and you only see as a potential way to get money in your pocket. If you were to take your advertising work and give it to that company only due to the interest of the fact that you could get money out of that firm, then in that case, that would be immoral. I do think it is important that organizations have in place policies to handle conflicts of interest like this, because I do believe a lot of people would take advantage of the fact that there is ways to financially take advantage of the company that they work for, and it's good to see that there's there's policies in place to take care of that.
The last topic that we're going to discuss here in Chapter 10 is whistleblowing. Whistleblowing refers to an employee or former employee informing the public of illegal or immoral conduct from an organization or one of its employees. It's a very controversial topic, and we're going to dive into the reasons of that, starting here with the motivation for potential whistleblowers. There's two big ones, but the main one being they have a sense of professional responsibility. So they kind of feel like it's the right thing to do to inform the public, and their ethical standards are high, and they just can't sit back idly and watch what's happening continue to take place. They feel like it's their duty to do something about it. And the example in the book about this is a lady by the name of Cynthia Cooper, who worked for an audit firm called WorldCom, and she kind of noticed something a little fishy about their accounting practices, and she went to the external auditor and asked if there was anything wrong with them, and he kind of reassured her that nothing was wrong, and she still seemed a little off, so she went to the CFO of the company, and he kind of told her to back off and not worry about it. So she didn't really like that response, and her team secretly dove into the company's accounting books and financials, and they uncovered all the wrongdoings that the CFO and the external auditor had gotten into, and they blew the whistle on them and got them in big trouble. The next motivation is a loyalty to the public interest over their organization. Loyalty to an organization is big, but at some point the loyalty to public interest kind of trumps that. An example of the book that the book gives for this is Colleen Rowley, who she worked for the FBI for 21 years, and that's what she wanted to do her whole life. And then she found out that her bosses ignored information that could have stopped the terrorist attacks on September 11th, 2001. And with this information, she thought that she had to tell the public, so she ended up telling the public and was labeled as disloyal by a lot of people in the FBI, but she thought that she was doing the right thing for both herself, the people of the United States, and the FBI. And the loyalty to the public can come for protecting their safety or their financials and many other things as well. Some pros and cons for people that are deciding on whether or not to whistleblow on their organization. For pros, it's the right thing to do. People can know that they did the right thing ethically or morally, and they won't have like a nagging regret knowing that they should have done something or could have stopped some illegal and immoral acts. So they'll just they feel that sense of public or professional responsibility, and they end up blowing the whistle. And then the False Claims Act gives a couple pros. One, it says that the organization cannot retaliate on the whistleblower, so it protects them from that. So if an organization tries to retaliate, it can stop that. It's written. And then also, people can potentially earn financial reward if their whistleblowing case is successful, which can be a lot of money depending upon how big the lawsuit is. And then some cons: you're risking your future if you blow the whistle. Getting labeled as a whistleblower can potentially be a pretty bad thing, especially if you don't win your case. Future employers might be hesitant to hire somebody that has that label. Another con is it's very time consuming once you get involved in a whistleblowing case. Once first you have to find all the evidence and examples, and then once the lawsuit starts, that's a lot of time on your hands. And lastly, you can be isolated from your current colleagues or future colleagues with that label of whistleblower on your head. So that kind of ties in with risking your future. So with whistleblowing being such a controversial topic, there are conditions that should be met when you're deciding on whether or not to blow the whistle. And these conditions show you whether or not you're morally justified in blowing the whistle or not. The first of these conditions is whether or not it is done from an appropriate moral motive. Your motive for blowing the whistle, it shouldn't be to get attention for yourself or negative attention on the organization. It should not be done to gain profit for yourself, and you shouldn't just do it just to stir up some drama. It should be done to expose unnecessary harm or unnecessary illegal and immoral practices that the organization or specific employers are participating in. The next condition is that all internal channels should be exhausted. You should go to each level above you and bring up your concerns and have specific examples and try to just solve it privately, because it's best to just get it done without the public knowing about it. Cynthia Cooper from WorldCom was a good example of this. She went all the way up to the CFO trying to solve the issue and figure out what's going on, and whenever he told her that it was okay, she went and found out for herself and then informed the public. The third condition is you should have compelling evidence that the illegal or immoral behavior is going on. The evidence should be able to be proved in a lawsuit, and you should have compelling, specific examples of the wrongdoing that's going on. The next one is just kind of an analysis of all of the wrongdoings that are going on, and it answers 3 questions. The first question is, how immediate is the problem? If it's something that is going to be in the next couple years, you may not be as justified to whistleblow, as that can be solved by the organization itself. Another question is, can the whistleblower point to a specific violation? And that kind of goes back to the specific examples from condition 3. And the third one is, how serious is the violation? Obviously, the more serious the violation, the more justified the whistleblower is going to be to end up turning it into an actual case. And then the last condition is that it should have some likelihood of success. And this kind of 3 and 4 are big ones for this. If you have compelling examples and it's an immediate problem, you'll have a higher likelihood of success. So it'd probably be more justified to blow the whistle. And if you don't have that evidence and you can't point to specific examples and it's not an immediate problem, your likelihood of success is not going to be as high, and it's not going to be as justified to blow the whistle on that organization.
All right, business ethics students, I'm back. I'm sure you all missed me after that riveting introduction. I'm going to leave you off with just a little bit more information about the chapter. We're talking about self-interest and moral obligation. So this discusses prudential reasoning versus moral reasoning, and prudential reasoning is a decision based off your self-interest. Moral reasoning is a decision based off your moral obligation to a third party. And these two things sometimes pull us in different directions. If a situation offers more prudential reasons than moral ones, you're likely going to do what is in your best interest and make a prudential decision. And then with moral reasoning, there's more harm to yourself and to your family, so you might wind up without a job because you honored your moral obligation to a third party. So an example from the book is that a cashier is asked to make a fake receipt for a trucker that comes in and buys food so they can get a bigger reimbursement from their company. And this cashier decides to act morally because they know that hurts the trucking company, and they tell the manager. Then this manager allows it because they don't want to lose that business by angering the truckers. So the cashier can then choose to make a moral decision and refuse to do this, and then report it to the trucking company, which in turn would probably cost them their job. But on the other hand, the scenario could be different. The cashier could be someone who relies on that job to make a living. Here's an example of, it's a single mother who doesn't have anything but a high school diploma, so they need that job. They won't be able to find work elsewhere, so they would say that the prudential reasons outweigh the moral reasons because they don't want to lose their job, and they'll continue to do these transactions without saying anything. And then, is it wrong to consider both? So this is kind of an argumentative topic in this discussion of self-interest and moral obligation. Some people argue that it is wrong to choose between self-interest and moral obligation. I can choose between those two when you're contemplating different scenarios. They think that there is nothing that can outweigh morality. And then others believe that you have a choice in your decision making because these decisions could affect your life. So that is all we have for you. I hope you guys enjoyed this presentation. Hopefully you're not asleep by now. I'm sure this is a long presentation, but I thank everyone for listening, and I hope everyone stays safe.